the live stream is started.
Chair, we're now live.
Thank you. I will ask each person present to confirm that they can hear and be heard. Where practical, please also have your video switched on. We have the following members of the forum. Beverly Blower. Beverly, can you hear me?
I can now, thank you.
Yeah. All right, thank you. That's okay. Dan Breary. Not yet. Okay, Christine Bryan.
Yes, hi, I can hear you.
Good morning. Alex Davis.
Morning.
Good morning. Paul Deneen.
Yes, I can see and hear you.
Good morning. Nikki Emmett.
Good morning. I've got camera issues. I'm working on them. I can hear you.
Thank you. Richard Foster.
Good morning. Yes, I can hear you.
Good morning. Nikki Gilbert. Not yet. Georgie Griffin.
Morning, Chair. I can see and hear you.
Good morning. Edward Gwilym. Sue Jenkins.
Good morning, I can see and hear you.
Good morning. Steve, and sorry, that's my fault, there's apologies from Steve Kendrick. Tim Knapp.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Yeah, I can hear you.
Good morning. Chris Lewandowski.
Good morning, all. Yes, I can both see and hear you.
Good morning. Rose Lloyd.
Good morning. Yes, I can see and hear you.
Good morning. Hayley Manns.
Good morning, I can see and hear you.
Good morning. Sheila Taylor. Sheila, can you hear me? I can see you.
I think possibly her microphone settings are not quite correct. Sheila, if you can you hear us? Can you give us a nod? I'll just give her a message in the background, Chair, see if she can rejoin us.
All right, thank you. Kathy Weston. No, okay. The following officers may also be in attendance. Liz Farr.
Good morning, everyone. I can see and hear you, Chair.
Good morning. Daryl Freeman. Excuse me. Malcolm Green.
Good morning, everyone. I can see and hear you.
Thank you. Alison Naylor.
Sending apologies, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Ivan Powell.
Yeah, morning all. Thanks for having me. Sorry I was late. I had to download Zoom. I had a new computer yesterday.
Good morning. Hilary Jones. Thank you, everyone. The agenda papers and other relevant information for this meeting are available for public viewing on the Herefordshire Council website. The Council is streaming this meeting live on the Herefordshire Council YouTube channel, and a recording will be available via the Council's website shortly after the meeting has concluded. Others are permitted to film, photograph and record our public meetings, providing that it does not disrupt the business of the meeting. Please use the raise hand icon to indicate that you wish to speak. Please remember to lower your hand again after you have spoken. Where forum members are required to vote on an item, we will conduct an electronic vote. If there are problems with the electronic vote, I will ask each member in turn to indicate verbally if they are for, against, or abstaining. If a forum member has not been present for the whole of the discussion on an item due to technical failure, they should not vote on that item. Are there any questions about the procedures before we continue?
No.
Okay, thank you. So we move on to the first item of the agenda, which is apologies for absence. Are there any apologies?
Chair, we've received apologies from Andy Gosling, Steve Kendrick, Andrew Teal, Paul Jennings, Ros Pither and Alison Naylor.
Okay, thank you. Are there any named substitutes for the meeting?
There are no named substitutes been informed, Chair.
Thank you. Moving on to declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Paul Deneen.
I'm a member of the National Education Union, and so I declare an interest with regard to one of the items.
Thank you. Tim Knapp.
I'm the head teacher of Whitecross High School, and therefore I declare an interest in item 5.
Okay, thank you. I can't see any other declarations of interest, so I will move on to item 4, which is minutes. So this item is to approve and sign the minutes of the meeting held on the 20th of October in 2023. Are there any matters arising not dealt with elsewhere on the agenda?
No.
No, thank you, Paul. All right, one of the items that I wish to raise is we had an action from the last meeting. The action was to write to MPs with regards to the forum's dissatisfaction with the DfE funding errors and to invite our MPs to the next meeting of the school's forum. The letter remains in the drafting process. So this morning I want to ask our members still strongly minded for us to send that letter, but also to suggest to consider. In addition, we might still be inclined to write with regards to the DfE's expansion of early years funding, particularly because Herefordshire has been set at the lowest rate nationally for 2-year-olds. Clark, can we please bring up the voting screen? If you weren't present at the last meeting, you should select the abstention option at the vote.
Still got a couple of members not yet voted. We have got, however, 76% of the vote in, and I can confirm that those are in favour to approve the minutes. Chair, if you're willing to pass those as approved.
Chair,
yeah.
I'm sorry, I couldn't respond, but I agree as well.
Okay, thank you.
Are you happy to move on, Chair? As
Yeah,
that is
absolutely, that's fine. Thank you. All right, so we move on then to item 5, the Whitecross PFI contract triennial review. Sorry, Paul.
Could I just support what you said earlier, Alison, about sending a letter? You said, you know, what should we do about it? And I think we should follow it up. And if there are other items that are of concern to Herefordshire, which affect Herefordshire children, then we should include that within the letter. So I'm supporting your...
Thank you.
Said earlier, and I don't know whether you need to get further support on that because we're asking for additional information to go in the letter, but I certainly would support what you've suggested.
Okay, thank you. My reading of this was that by approving the minutes, because we'd put in the letter as an action that now it's approved, we'll do that. But yeah, absolutely, we are asking to add some extra information in. Do we need to do a supplementary vote on that, Clark, or are we happy to proceed?
I'm happy with a show of heads if you're happy with that, Chair. If everyone, I suppose if anyone's in disagreement, please raise your hand. I suppose it's the easiest because I think most people...
Can we leave it to you, Alison, as chair, with anyone else you need to talk to, rather than by committee, and trust you implicitly to do that? Perhaps talking to Malcolm and the head of additional needs and whoever else you need to talk to, really.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fine. Okay, so moving on to item 5, which is Whitecross PFI contract. I call on Malcolm Green to present the report.
Right. Thank you, Alison. I haven't got a slideshow regarding the PFI report. It's a routine report on. It's a routine triennial report. It comes to Schools Forum every 3 years for a review of the funding that underpins the PFI contract. The unitary charge that we pay to Stepnol is about £3 million a year, and it's about 50% is fixed and 50% is indexed to the retail prices index, excluding mortgage interest. So when inflation is high, the council has to put extra budget into the funding in order for there to be a small surplus at the end of the contract. The work that we've done indicates that the council will have to add 100,000 per year for the remainder of the contract from April 24, and that report is going to Cabinet in February and will be agreed as part of the council's annual budget. The review that we've done of the funding model says that if inflation, i.e. RPIX, continues at 5% until 2031, there will be a small deficit of 128,000 in the sinking fund at the end of the contract, which will require the council to put further funding in. However, if inflation falls to 3%, then we will end up with £1 million surplus, and the council will simply not have to fund the final year of the contract. The difficulty is, of course, forecasting inflation for the next 7 years, and it's compounded further by the fact that the government measures inflation on the Consumer Prices Index, which is the CPI model, and the Retail Prices Index, excluding inflation, is usually 1% higher than CPI. So that just adds another complexity. We will come back in 3 years' time for another review, but at the moment, with the £100,000 that the council will add as extra, the funding is on track. I offered Tim the opportunity to comment on the report, and I'm not sure whether he wishes to add anything, but as far as the funding is concerned, everything is in order for the next 3 years. Schools Forum is just asked to note the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Malcolm. Nikki.
Hi everyone, sorry I am here. I think I missed my name on the roll call. Just asking Malcolm, I mean, I remember Whitecross being built, but there's a lot of head teachers who weren't here at the time. How long is this contract for?
The contract ends in 2031. So we're about 2/3 of the way through the contract.
Okay.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments that anyone wishes to make?
Just to support the what's been mentioned. I think there's no need for us to support it, but because it's denoting. But I mean, we've got the school there; it's a very good school, and the head's with us there. And I mean, I think we just approve it.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I will now move the recommendation that the council's planned increase of £100,000 for 2024 to 25 to bring the annual base budget to £1,128,350 per annum is noted. That the annual contribution be reviewed taking account of the then inflation rate at the next triennial review in autumn 2026. And finally, that the report of the next triennial review be received by Schools Forum in January 2027. So, Clark, can we bring up the voting screen, please? Please cast your vote and press the submit button. If you can't see the voting screen or you're not able to vote, please raise your hand.
Again, I think there could be a few stragglers with the voting chair, but 12 out of the 17 have agreed that that does go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So moving on to item 6, schools budget 2024-25. So I call on Malcolm Green to present the report.
Right, thank you, Alison. I have a short slideshow presentation which supplements the additional report from the budget working group. And I'll just take you through the main points of the written report. And then I'm happy to have a discussion or answer questions. Next slide, please, Jem. Right, just some background as to the school budget. Firstly, to say that we simply have to comply with DfE funding regulations, and the vast majority of the work that is done on the school budget is set by DfE, and the amount of discretion that Schools Forum or the council have is extremely limited. Dedicated Schools Grant this year was published on the 19th of December. This is later than in previous years, and actually the budget modeler used to work the budget out was also given to me on the 19th of December, and that is usually provided on early December. So we've been very time constrained this year as a result of the DfE budget error. The schools block we've got is just short of 130 million. And just to remind Schools Forum that the original budget proposals from the DfE published in the summer have been reduced by 0.7% due to the £350 million budget error. We have 56 fewer primary pupils and 89 more secondary pupils. And so this is the beginning of a reduction in primary pupils that will eventually feed through to secondary schools. Effectively today for Schools Forum, there is a choice between two options for the schools budget, with a continuation of the SEN protection scheme with a associated transfer of 0.5% to the high needs block, or effectively no transfer to the high needs block, which will terminate the SEN protection scheme. And I'll come on to the further work that we commissioned from HMI, Tonwin Empson before Christmas. Also, what is new is there is a big expansion of early years provision with new nursery education funding for working families, 2-year-olds and under 2-year-olds. So we'll cover that. Please move on, please, Jen. The preferred option, which is the council's preferred option and was supported by the HMI and the budget working group, is option A, which is to cap the school gains, those schools gaining under the national funding formula, to be capped to 4.5%, which creates 649,000 to transfer to the high needs block. And this is at the DfE limit of the 0.5% that Schools Forum can agree. This was supported by the budget working group and the HMI, and is the council's preferred outcome. Alternative B is no transfer. Soon before Christmas and after Christmas, HMI Tonwin Empson surveyed a number of schools for us, had discussions with them, including some schools that do not receive any of the protection scheme. And we can move on to the next slide, please. Head teachers were very clear that the pupils in their schools directly benefit from having the SEN protection scheme. Tonwin said the funding was crucial in enabling schools to provide for the increasing needs that pupils are presenting, and school leaders strongly welcomed the protection funding and said without it they would not be able to provide the resources to meet those pupils. Consequently, Tom Wynn's advice to us is the case is strong to continue with this arrangement if financially possible. So we'll move on, please. She did make some suggestions to us, which we have taken on board, and say that schools are looking increasingly at alternative strategies to achieve strong outcomes and help promote independence for those pupils, and we should share this good practice. That schools would welcome a forecast of the SEN protection funding early in the financial year to help with their budgeting, and schools would welcome faster payment of top-up funding following application. We have taken all of those things on board, and we will pursue them. So please move next slide. The other items discussed with the budget working group were the delegation proposals, and the budget working group supported the approval of a 1.9% rise on those delegation items and education management costs, which is in line with the 1.9% increase per pupil funding. For the delegation for new services of CLEAPS and the primary behaviour, the proposed additional £1 per pupil, there was a very mixed response, with some in favour and some possibly mostly no for CLEAPS and marginally in favour for primary behaviour. There was no clear mandate, and so we do not wish to proceed with the delegation of those. And I just need to stress this is the only change to the recommendations in the report that is with Schools Forum today, and we will make this clear when we come to the voting arrangements. The next slide, please. I'll very quickly go over the early years funding and what's in the proposals, and then we'll open up for questions and discussion. The early years funding, again, we discussed it at the budget working group, and there are two representatives from early years with us today, Rose Lloyd and Hayley Manns, who I'm sure will be able to contribute to answering questions. From April 24, working parents, eligible working parents of 2-year-olds will be able to access 15 hours of funded childcare, which is new. From September 25, eligible parents of under 2-year-olds from 9 months will be able to access 15 hours of funded childcare. And from September 25, all the eligible working parents will be able to access 30 years of funded childcare. The DFE makes the funding available, and it's up to the council to work with providers to ensure the sufficiency of places. The next slide, please. There's been a disappointing settlement, I think, in terms of the rates that DFE have given us. For 3- and 4-year-olds, it's gone up from £5.20 per hour to £5.47 per hour. And this is an increase of 5.19% on the rate for 23-24. For 2-year-old funding, the DFE have given us a composite rate which covers both working families and disadvantaged 2-year-olds. And for Herefordshire, the rate has been left the same at £7.19. So effectively, that is a 0% increase. And the DFE have left it to us to disaggregate into two rates, one for working families for 2-year-olds and one for disadvantaged 2-year-olds. And we have done that by applying the same 5.19% increase to the disadvantaged 2-year-olds as we have received for the 3- and 4-year-olds to calculate the disadvantaged supplement. Please move on. It's just worth setting out, in view of the discussion about writing to the DFE and to ministers about Herefordshire's funding, the 3- and 4-year-old funding, we are the joint bottom of the funding league table along with 45 other local authorities on £5.47. You can see the average rate, we are below the average rate by 9%, and not surprisingly, the highest is in London, which is Camden. For 2-year-old funding, we are the lowest nationally on £7.19. We are 15% below average, and again, the highest is in London at Westminster. Worcestershire gets 7.44 pence per hour, Gloucestershire £7.60 per hour, and Shropshire £7.26 per hour. What is of concern to us is we don't really understand how we can share with 45 other local authorities the lowest funding for 3 and 4-year-olds, and the DFE applies a floor mechanism to the funding that raises everybody to the same low level for 46 local authorities, and why that floor mechanism doesn't appear to be applied to 2-year-olds, and we are so low, so much further beneath all our neighbours. So we are very concerned about that, and the early years representatives tell us that the rate that we will be allocating for working families 2-year-olds funding is less than that is currently charged by providers. So we will have to discuss that further in our nursery education funding group. The next slide, please. The position is somewhat similar for the under 2-year-old funding rate per hour, in that we are the second lowest nationally on £9.77, only Rutland is lower, and again we are below our nearest neighbours of Worcestershire, Gloucestershire and Shropshire, and again there seems to be no floor mechanism to protect those lowest funded authorities, and we are a similar 15% below average. So the funding we've got for 2-year-olds and under 2-year-olds is quite a concern to us in ensuring that we have the sufficiency of places. I think, is that the last slide? Is there another slide, Jen? Oh, there we go. Yes. So the rates we are in the recommendations are, we have disadvantaged 7.34, £7.34 per hour. Working families is less with the £6.85, the difference being the deprivation supplement. The under 2-year-olds is £9.51, and we've reworked the 3 and 4-year-old funding, which is a slightly more complicated formula, so that it's £5 plus 42 pence per hour deprivation and a £63 per week rurality. And the rurality payment is akin to a lump sum to a primary school, but it causes confusion and is not well understood by the early years sector. The next slide, please. We are proposing that we apply a 2.7% retention to the 2-year-old and under 2-year-olds. We currently don't have any retention for the disadvantaged 2-year-olds, and we have been out to consultation with the early years sector, and we propose retaining 1.35% of that retention will fund £150,000 of SEN fund. Currently we have £150,000 in the early years budget, but it's funded by the high needs block, and we are unable to do that. We are unable to expand it because of the overspending high needs, and therefore the proposal is it will come from a retention of the 2-year-old funding. We're also proposing to retain £50,000 to provide free in-county training, as it's far more efficient to provide the training free at the point of delivery rather than bill all the providers separately. And the £80,000, which we didn't consult on, is for necessary additional advisory staff in the early years team to plan and help deliver the large expansion of early years. In terms of the consultation, we had 16 responses, 100% in favour of the SEN Inclusion Fund retention, 80% in favour of free in-county training. In the online meeting we had, were about over 30 providers attended, and we had some discussion about the value of the 2-year-old deprivation supplement and the fact that this took the rate we were paying to working families to below what is currently charged. And we also talked about phasing down the 3- and 4-year-old retention over time to make it consistent with the 2.7. We have agreed to review all of those and gather more evidence to send back to the DfE in our NEF group, which I believe meets in early February. That is a very brief run through of the important issues in matters in the school's budget, and I think we can probably close the slideshow, and I'm happy to take questions as they arise. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Malcolm. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Chris Lewandowski.
Thank you, Chair. For maintained schools, not early years, obviously money is going to be very tight. How many are likely to face a staff reduction scenario, i.e. redundancies, in the coming year?
I've only seen one school with that in hand at the moment, Chris. Many of our schools have considerable balances, and that will provide a cushion. But clearly, funding for schools is tight, and I don't see that changing in the next 3 to 5 years. I think it's going to be a succession of difficult budget decisions. We will only know more about redundancy planning perhaps towards the end of February, when all the consultations have been concluded by HR. So I can come back to you in due course.
Right, I wish you would, please. Presumably the cushion won't last forever, though. If they use it this year, they won't be able to use it next year, and so on. So the likelihood of redundancies is going to increase. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Nikki Gilbert.
Yeah, just the figures of the reduction in primary 56 and increase in secondary, is that the entire county's pupils, regardless of which school they're in? Does it include the special school cohort?
No, it doesn't include special schools. Special schools are funded separately from the high needs block and don't form a part of the discussion or the decision today, and so primary numbers are excluded from those figures, Nikki. Yes.
So are they, just so that they're taken on a particular day? Is it, which census are they taken from? I'm just thinking because there's a lot of movement and there's a lot of pupils with no places at the moment. So how accurate are those figures with regards to when were those figures taken from?
Yeah, the DfE based their funding on the October census, and those figures should be 100% accurate, because the council validates the school's PLASC submission, so that they will be accurate as at the October census. I mean, clearly the DfE can't use the January census and stick to the timelines that we've got in front of us today.
Okay, it's just, as you know, the special schools are absolutely 100% full and oversubscribed and underfunded. So I did ask if we could have an item on budget working group about the inequity in the funding between mainstream and special, because I'm just wanting to clarify as well for my colleagues that, you know, the SEM protection scheme that is seen as being extremely valuable. Does that go into the main school budget from the high needs tariffs?
The SEN protection scheme is paid to those mainstream schools who have higher than average numbers of pupils on receiving top-up funding, and it's paid as a supplement to their national funding formula budget.
Okay, it's just that the national funding formula has gone up, as has the SEN protection scheme, and special schools base funding hasn't increased for 10 years, as we know. So I do think it's really important that we actually present what's going on with the base funding of special schools at some point, because nobody really understands that it hasn't changed for 10 years. And that's why the high needs funding needs to increase year on year, because there's no carry forward in special school budgets, because we're having to use every last little bit of carry forward to pay our teachers, not the TAs, because it's the teachers who are paid through the base funding, and that's the equivalent of the DSG, and we don't get a lump sum. So I'm not playing poor me, it's just that I have asked if we can present this, because there is a huge inequity, and yet we are the ones who are being asked to take more and more pupils. There's no reduction in primary school pupils in special schools, and it's crisis points. We're going in deficit now for the first time in my entire career, and I really would like some focus on it, because every time the mainstream DSG goes up and this protection goes up, the special schools doesn't, and it's only the tariffs that go up, and that is unsustainable.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, Nikki, 100%. The £10,000 base rate for special schools has been remained unchanged since 2014. A couple of months ago, I did an inflation calculation using the Bank of England inflation calculator, and it would have gone up to 13,500.
Yeah.
But that is a rate that is set by DFE. We are required to use it. As you know, the available money in the high needs block, we always try to pay a higher inflation, double inflation rate to the special school tariffs D to F to make up for that. But it is something we could and probably should put in school forums letter to the DFE, because I do not understand why they cannot increase that rate.
No, I mean, I am actively trying to get rid of pupils. That's how hard it is at the moment, because we have no additional capacity in the building. The needs are getting greater. We're getting more and more requests, and actually the funding per pupil is completely inadequate. Like you said, if it was 13,000 now, over the past every year, if it had gone up, I wouldn't be in deficit, and you wouldn't be forced to increase the tariffs, and there would be more money for everybody. You know, and I'm very conscious of that. So I think it does need maybe a more detailed discussion so that mainstream colleagues understand the difficulties that we're in, because we don't want to say no, and we don't want to push people out, but we literally cannot run safe schools anymore.
Yeah. It is certainly on the agenda. The whole of the high needs block budget is on the agenda for the next budget working group, and it will come back here in March. So there is opportunity to discuss it further, Nikki.
Okay, thank you. Next is Rose Lloyd.
Thank you. Obviously, I'm aware that the rates cannot be changed at this time, but I just wanted to take the opportunity to kind of just remind the forum of the importance of good early years education and how that helps through the child's whole schooling. We're in a position now that staff costs are going up. You know, minimum wage is going up 10, 11% every year. We have no control over that, and we have no control over how many staff we do employ, because of the fact that the ratios are set within early years at such a high level. Within Herefordshire, now that we've got this funding set, there is a definite feeling that a lot of settings may not offer this option to parents, and so we will then have a sufficiency issue. I'm aware that there is a working group that's going to be started, and we're all going to be working to try and kind of fix this problem as much as we can. But I just wanted to make Forum aware that within the next, within the near future, we may have an issue within the county. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Rose. Paul Deneen.
Yeah, just to support really, Nikki, and also to support what's just been said by Rose, really. I mean, I think there are big issues for me about the fairness and equity. And if you look at what Malcolm had said, we've got the early years funding model, for example. I mean, all the costs are up wherever people are living. So the model is metropolitan. If we look at Camden getting as much as it does, it's a metropolitan model that doesn't take into account the rural deprivation. So I think that's one of the most important issues that we've got to try and get through. So on the letter, Alison, I think we've got three sort of parts to the letter. One is the general funding. The whole thing should have been fully funded because they made a mistake last year over the funding, and we've had to suffer consequences. Secondly, the special school situation, which I think is something that needs to be revisited by the DfE to make it fair and equitable. And I think it's incredibly important that we value and appreciate the work that's done in special schools, and also that the particular help and support that individuals get there. So it's really important we get that sorted. And then I think the focus on early years funding model, I think, is the third thing. So those three things in the letter, with clear what the issues are, what the problems are, and what the suggestion may be to move this forward. And it may be helpful to perhaps think about a Teams meeting as well as a letter between yourself, Alison, the Vice Chair, and perhaps people from these groups who can have a conversation with Bill Wiggin and with Jessie Norman, just to get them in the picture, because I think we are at a crucial stage here, and I think we need to do all we can to support the children in Herefordshire, and we're not getting a fair deal. And the fact of the matter is, in Gloucestershire, Shropshire and Worcestershire, they're getting a better deal, and literally people can be on the border. So why should they be disadvantaged? So I think, we need to up the campaign there to try and get fairer funding for all the children in Herefordshire.
Yeah, I agree. And I also, with the three parts to the letter, and it's not that I disagree with Nikki either, but I'm a secondary school head teacher, and I don't see an increase in my budget, and budgets are tight everywhere. So take those points on board. And as we voted in the item earlier on, to write that letter, I agree in that being important, and more consultation, as you say, from those various working parties. So I agree. Hayley Manns, please.
I think everyone's kind of said what I wanted to say, really. I couldn't agree more with everyone that I feel like it's a crucial point, isn't it? And my biggest concern is the impact that this is going to have on our children. Everybody here is working in education. We all know that our SEND children are growing, and we don't have anywhere for them to go. So yeah, I feel like the letter really needs to strongly detail quite what the crisis is. I agree with Rose. I'm in early years. There is a general feeling with all the early years settings that we might not be considering offering funding because it just isn't viable. So yeah, I agree with what everybody said. I think it needs to be very strongly worded letter about the issues, and that we need to find a solution. We actually need to find a solution. The impact's going to be massive. We're going to have a real problem in a minute.
Okay, thank you. Okay, are there any other comments or questions that anyone has or would like to make on this item? Oh, Liz.
Just in full support, Alison, of what colleagues have raised today, particularly around early years and special school funding. I'm particularly grateful for the support and the clarity of points that colleagues have made today.
Thank you, Liz. All right, thank you, everyone. I'll now move on to voting on the recommendations, and which, new for this year, are all set out in Appendix 3 at the end of the report. Voting on each recommendation may be restricted by regulation. For clarity, I'll set out who can vote on each block of recommendations as we vote. Those attendees who are not eligible to vote on a particular block of recommendations, please abstain in the upcoming polls. The recommendations are to be grouped into 8 blocks for ease of voting, unless anybody has any objection to that. None. Okay, thank you. So vote 1 is for all forum members. Recommendation 3, as set out in the report, for the continued transfer of 0.05% to the high needs block to support the SEN protection scheme. Please cast your vote and press the submit button. If you cannot see the voting screen or are unable to vote, please raise your hand. So I can see the voting screen has been brought up.
Okay, Chair, those recommendations have been passed.
Thank you, everyone. I now move on to vote 2. So this is for only schools, academies and early years members. Recommendations 1A to N as set out in the report, covering school funding values. Please cast your vote and press the submit button. If you cannot see the voting screen or are unable to vote, please raise your hand. Would the clerk please bring up the voting screen?
Thank you, Chair. Again, those recommendations are in favour of 4 and passing those.
Okay, thank you. I'll move on to vote 3, which is for all forum members. This is for recommendations 2, 4 and 5 as set out in the report, covering growth funding, approval for minor adjustments and central support services. So please cast your vote and press the submit button. Again, if you can't see the voting screen or you're not able to vote, please raise your hand. So would the clerk please bring up the voting screen?
Okay, Chair, again, Chair, those recommendations have been passed in favour.
Thank you, everyone. And now move on to vote 4. So this is for local authority primary and secondary school members only. It's recommendation 6, items A to I, as set out in the report, to improve an increase in 1.9% in the dedelegation of funding in 2024-25. Voting on this item is restricted to, by regulation, to representatives of local authority schools only, and further restricted by phase where dedelegation applies specifically to primary or secondary schools. In addition, local authority special schools may vote on item I only. As this is a small number, I will ask the clerk to take the vote by roll call.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So if you could cast your vote for, against or abstain. Alison Banner?
4.
Dan Breary?
4.
Sue Jenkins?
4.
I don't believe we had Kathy here, did we? Kathy Weston? She was missing. Okay. And then Nikki Gilbert for item I only.
Yeah, that's fine. 4.
Okay, Chair, thank you. Those are in favour, they'll be approved.
Thank you, everyone. I move on to vote 5. So this again is for local authority primary and secondary school members only, as appropriate. So recommendation 6, items J and K. Following feedback from the consultation and schools budget working group, the forum agrees not to proceed with the proposals for the CLEAPS and the primary behaviour support service as set out in the report. As this is a small number, I will ask the clerk to take the vote by roll call.
Thank you, Chair. So same again, for, against and abstain. Alison Banner.
For.
Dan Breary.
For.
Sue Jenkins. For. And Kathy Weston is absent from the meeting. So that's it. Thank you, Chair. That's approved.
Thank you, everyone. I'll now move on to vote 6. So local authority schools, academies and early years members only. Recommendation 7A to D, that the early years funding formula for Herefordshire providers from April 2024 be approved. Please cast your vote and press the submit button. If you can't see the voting screen or are unable to vote, please raise your hand. Would the clerk please bring up the voting screen?
Thank you, Chair. We have a majority there, so those will also be approved recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I move on now to vote 7, and this is for all forum members. Recommendation 7E to F. Please note there is a typo, as recommendation F is listed in the report as a second C at the end of the report. The recommendation is that the early years retained central expenditure be approved. Please cast your vote and press the submit button. If you cannot see the voting screen or you're unable to vote, please raise your hand. Would the clerk please bring up the screen?
Thank you, Chair. Again, we have a majority to pass those recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I now move on to vote 8, and again for all forum members. And finally, to summarise all of the decisions already taken, recommendation 8 that the 2024-25 schools budget be approved as set out in the report. Please cast your vote and press the submit button. If you can't see the voting screen or you're unable to vote, please raise your hand. Would the clerk please bring up the voting screen?
Thank you, Chair. Again, the majority cast that those recommendations are in favour to approve. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So the final thing to say is thank you all for attending and for Malcolm for the presentations that were made today. I'll now call the meeting to a close. The next meeting is on Friday, the 15th of March. Please can I have confirmation that the live stream has stopped?